Good. All right, so we're recording. Hey guys, this is Garvin from Dublin Tour Guide, private walking tours of Dublin City. Today I'm here with Tomislav Matana. He's an expert guide in Dubrovnik, Croatia, and we're going to be talking about the impact that geography has had on Dubrovnik in particular, but also in Croatia in general. Tomislav runs a private walking tour company in Dubrovnik. He does customized tours of the city, as well as chauffeured tours, that is driving tours outside of Dubrovnik. His website is dubrovnikexpert.com. Just wanted to make sure I didn't get that wrong. So geography is a very interesting topic and factor when it comes to history, because so many wars, so many battles, and so many nations' destinies have been changed, have been morphed because of geography, because of local topography, mountains, lakes, rivers, seas, accessibility to supplies and allies. It's all in there. So Tomislav and me, we're going to have a chat about this today. So Tomislav, or Tommy, or Tom, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Garvan. I'm glad to be here, and I hope you're enjoying the time in Ireland.
Yeah, well, now we're currently under COVID still, and I've taken the time to try to grow out some sort of beard. So I do look a bit rugged. I like to say rugged rather than rough. But it'll take it a while before it turns into your bush. You've got a good one there.
Thank you very much.
So, Tomislav, tell me about how crucial Dubrovnik's geography has been to the trials and tribulations, the successes and failures of Dubrovnik and Croatia.
Well, first and foremost, geography is the reason why the city, as Dubrovnik, has developed this particular condition. Technically, Croatia is rugged, just like your facial hair currently. And what also constitutes as a natural barrier is also sometimes a problem in communication. So in order to facilitate the connection between one state and the other, or one entity and the other, you had to have a suitable intermediary. And Dubrovnik is actually situated at the perfect position to fulfill this particular role. So basically, Dubrovnik was located between the Balkan Peninsula, which is southeastern part of Europe, and the Mediterranean basin. It's located on strategic crossroad where the goods from the Mediterranean world would be entering the Balkans. And it was also perfectly located to accommodate the raw materials coming from the hinterland. It's a natural.
I believe you have a map to show us to kind of help everybody to figure out where it is in Europe, where it is in Croatia, and how the impact of the neighboring empires have forged Dubrovnik's I suppose destiny.
So basically, Dubrovnik is located in this particular part. It says Ragusa on it. Ragusa is a Latin name for Dubrovnik. So one added benefit that Dubrovnik also had was that it was bilingual from the start. So it was dominantly Croatian city, but it has Roman origins. And there was another language that was also spoken in Dubrovnik, which died out in time, but that language was similar to Italian, which was the commercial language of the Mediterranean basin. So basically, the Dubrovnikers were able to trade with the neighboring city-states in Italy, and then further on all along the Mediterranean coasts. and also with the people from the hinterland which spoke the variants of the Slavic language that we know now as Serbo-Croatian. But if you want to divide it, there's basically 6 languages that are similar to the variant that they spoke at the time. So technically Croatian, Bosnian, Serbian, Montenegrin, Bulgarian, Macedonian. It is all mutually intelligible languages. So not only that it was located at the perfect spot, it was able to get the raw material from the hinterland, process them and ship them across the seas. It also was able to equip all these countries that are located behind the mountain range with the goods coming from the Western Europe. And it was so successful that it even rivaled the famous Republic of Venice. Now, Dubrovnik currently is a part of Croatia. So on this map, you don't see Croatia, which only came to existence in 1991 in the current form. It looks like this now. And little dot at the bottom is actually Dubrovnik. This southern part of the country is actually where former Dubrovnik Republic, independent city-state, used to exist for about 450 years. Now, Dubrovnik might have been small, but it was quite successful in balancing between bigger countries and empires. I'm going to go back to the previous map, which shows you a couple of them. And there's one that is quite important for our discussion today, and that's the Ottoman Empire, or if you wish, Turkey, as it's written on this map. Now, I mentioned that geography was an important factor that formed the development of Dubrovnik, and in fact of Croatia. And if you look closely on this map, you will see that the border between the Ottoman Empire, which is in purple, and the Austria-Hungary in green, is basically resembling the current border between Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So technically speaking, this border hasn't changed for over 500 years. So the Ottoman Empire was able to get fairly close to Western Europe. In fact, the Ottomans waged 2 separate battles seizing Vienna. And in course of these military campaigns, a great deal of the Balkans and Croatia was taken over. However, this border was stabilized in 16 and 1700s, and basically it remained pretty much the same as it is now. Dubrovnik, being a small country, at the time was not able to muster a big army, so it had to employ other means to remain independent. And the value of Dubrovnik to the Ottomans was crucial because it was the only port that they could use to trade, to get the Western merchandise. And also Dubrovnik, in the same time, was able to stabilize its position as the main supplier to the Ottoman Empire, all the Western goods coming to the Ottoman Empire. In the same time, they were also getting rare goods that were lacking in the Western states, such as spices, silk. Since the Ottoman Empire was a force to be reckoned with that controlled pretty much a great deal of Southeastern Europe, north of Africa, and the Middle East, was pretty much commanding the trade routes coming from the Asian countries. Now,
I remember when we visited Dubrovnik for, well, I was there for my mini moon and my honeymoon, and you gave us a great tour of the city. And of course, the first time we met, you were there at the top of that island of Dubrovnik. What's the island of that? What's the name of that island? Say that again.
Island Vlokrum. Vlokrum.
Oh, Krum. Yeah. And
Like
you were there with a bottle of sparkling wine and some strawberries. So I asked you to sort that out to surprise her. And we eventually got up to the top of the of the hill to the summit to the battlements there, and that was just a lovely moment. But anyway, when we did the tour of the city, there was a lot of amazing topics and insights that you gave us, and I think it's a great opportunity now for you to explain how Dubrovnik was able to play the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and also what the Pope demanded of Dubrovnik and what Dubrovnik replied.
So basically, Dubrovnik found itself in a really difficult position in the eve of the Ottoman conquest. So the 14th century, 15th century were fairly difficult to predict what's going to happen. Ottomans have never lost a battle, and in fact, Dubrovnik knew that they could not oppose the Ottomans by force. So basically, what they tried to do was to appease them and try to open the port to their goods. So in the same time, when they were sort of, let's say, dealing with the Ottomans, trying to maintain their precarious position as the main port for this part of the European, for the Balkan Peninsula, they were trying to explain to Pope and the Western states, namely Spain, Austria, so the main enemies of the Ottoman Empire, that what they're doing was right and necessary for the preservation of Catholic Christendom in this part of Europe. So Dubrovnik was the last outpost of Catholicism in the region that was dominated by the Muslims and the Orthodox people. And for the sway of the Catholic Christianity to continue, Dubrovnik had to be preserved. So they were actually able to get a special permission from the Pope and from the King of Hungary, who was the official protector of the Dubrovnik Republic, to trade directly with the Ottomans. It was the only Catholic Christian state that was able to obtain that special permission during the war between the Western states and the Ottoman Empire. For about 200 years, Dubrovnik was virtually Turkish Hong Kong, if you wish, or Casablanca, where you would be able to gain all the information about the movement of the enemy troops. You would be able to get all the merchandise from both East and West, and it was able to stay, most importantly, out of war. It did not
so
participate.
All of that was because of its location, its geographic location being so far south, right?
Exactly. And on the other hand, it's the added benefit of having the rugged terrain. The campaign against Dubrovnik would have taken too much time. Now, since Garvan was in Dubrovnik, he witnessed the walls of Dubrovnik. But walls were actually there only for show. If it needed be, they would be put in use. But they tried to avert the conflict. They tried to avoid the conflict by any means possible. And by any means, I mean anything. Bribery, gifts, whatever you call it. You can call it diplomacy, you can call it bribery, you can call it gifts, but at the end of the day, it did its work. So that's the reason why the Ottomans never actually taken over Dubrovnik, because they were actually benefiting from the fact that Dubrovnik had a special relationship with them. In the same time, the Western states allowed Dubrovnik to continue doing this because it was vital information that they were getting from Dubrovnik about the movement of the enemy troops, and that they could employ against the Ottomans when it was necessary. So it was a hive of intelligence activity, and perhaps one of the most important ports in the 1500s and 1600s.
And do you want to say about you want to talk about the trading that Dubrovnik engaged in a little bit more, because that's such a vital aspect of why when people come to visit Dubrovnik, they can see a city that's nearly, captured in the late medieval period. A lot of the architecture is from the 14th and 15th and 16th century. Is that correct?
That's correct, although a great deal of it was destroyed in the earthquake at the end of the 17th century. However, what's most important was that the city walls, the main attraction of Dubrovnik, survived. They were actually designed to last. Now, Dubrovnik, as I said, was not only a well-protected port. In fact, the trade is, I usually like to say that even though Roman Catholicism is the main religion over here, but I would say that trade was their main religion from the early days. Even though the location is nice to be at, it's quite mild climate and it's close to the water, so it's a popular tourist destination. Now, it doesn't have many natural resources, and that's the reason why the trade developed over here. In order to survive, the Dubrovnikers had to put in use what they had at the time. Now, maritime activity was present from its inception. So from the 7th century, when Dubrovnik was founded, the Dubrovnikers were fishermen. Now, salted fish that they traded with the people from the hinterland was the first item that they traded with. But then they realized that salt itself was far more valuable, because in the Middle Ages, in order to preserve meat or fish, you had to salt it. They didn't have the refrigerators at the time. And that was pretty much the starting point of the development of Dubrovnik as a trading nation, as a trading port. So the salt was exported behind the mountains all the way to Bosnia and Montenegro and Serbia, and further on to Bulgaria and the Byzantine Empire. And in return for salt, they would be able to get the raw materials that they would process and ship across to Italy and further out in the Mediterranean. So salt was the basic income that pretty much started the entire project, the development as a trading destination. Now, salt was as valuable as gold at the time. A pound of salt was worth a pound of gold for a while. And those that controlled the supply of salt pretty much controlled the trading routes.
And when was that?
Pretty much from the 1100s up until the 1500s. So Venice started the same way. However, Venice developed into imperialistic force, whereas Dubrovnik remained fairly small, for which it often quarreled with Venice. There were numerous battles between Dubrovnikers and the Venetians, and in fact, Dubrovnik had a lot to learn from the Venetians. In fact, it was even taken over by Venetians on 3 separate occasions. However, it managed to outlive the Venetian Republic, which is probably the most
so that's the win, yeah, as long as you outlive those guys. So maybe for everyone's convenience, if you could show us the other map and point out the location of Venice.
This is the map from...
yeah, that's fine, yeah.
I think it's from the second half of the 1800s, when Venice also lost its independence. So Dubrovnik and Venice are shown as a part of the same country, which was known as the Austria-Hungary at the time. And it was, funnily enough, the same bane that Venice faced that caused Dubrovnik's demise, and it was the advancement of Napoleonic troops. So when we usually talk about Dubrovnik, I usually like to say that in the last 200 years, we changed about 6 different administrations, which makes things a whole lot more complicated. But for what it's worth, what's most important to mention was that from 1358, from 14th century, until the arrival of Napoleon, Dubrovnik was virtually independent state. After that, it was part of the French, then Austrian Empire, then the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, then you had Second World War and 2 occupations, Italian and German, then Socialist Yugoslavia, and then finally from 1991, Croatia.
So we're right in saying that Venice, being the maritime power that they were, they did have they did have colonies. They did control a good swathe of the land and islands along the current Croatian coast and further down, and also they had parts of what is now the Greek islands, and then even, you know, colonies there where Constantinople is, different Greek islands, and I think maybe a few other places. But just in a Croatian context, if we go back to Croatia there, it seems like they were more annoying to the people on the island of Hvar and the other islands, and definitely split with Diocletian's palace, an old Roman emperor's retirement home. And I tell you, it's some home. The Italian connection is definitely stronger in Split. The proximity to in that case just Italy, just Rome, but it always struck me that, you know, Dubrovnik being rather the farthest southern part of Croatia, didn't get the immediate wrath of the Venetians to the same extent as the rest of the Croatian coast. Would you agree?
I definitely would agree, because Dubrovnik was also offhand, to be honest. And if you look at the geography of Croatia, Croatia is known as the country of 1,000 islands. It's actually 1,244 islands, last time I counted. And out of those, I think only 50 have permanent population currently. But as you move further down the coast of Croatia, you will notice that the islands are becoming less scarce and the sea is much deeper.
Maybe you could switch to the other image.
Dubrovnik is, so as you can see, from the north, from the peninsula of Istria all the way down, there's lots of islands. Then you pass Split, which is the center of the southern region. Then you pass Hvar, Korčula down to Mljet, and then in front of Dubrovnik, very few islands, only maybe 13 in the vicinity of this area. Now, it's the only Croatian city that doesn't have the island in front, which did allow Dubrovnik to easily spot the approaching danger. It should give them enough time to organize the defenses. Mm-hmm. If you combine that with the mountain range in Dubrovnik hinterland, so behind the old town of Dubrovnik is the mount called Surge, Mount of St. Surge, which is about 490 meters high. And then the mountain range gets even higher and higher. It's fairly difficult to sneak up on Dubrovnik, especially when you have a city that is so fortified as Dubrovnik is. It has 2 layers of walls, and at the time it also had a moat. So basically, you would have to combine land assault with a naval siege to get in, and that would take a while.
So do you want to talk a little bit about, sorry to interrupt, but maybe in a little while you could speak about that mountain ridge and how defensive that was for Dubrovnik, and how that played a part in Dubrovnik's relative independence for, you know, the last, 800 of the last 1,000 years or so.
So when you think about the fact that between the Roman times, between the Emperor Diocletian, whom we mentioned, who had a palace in Split, basically Split was developed from his holiday home, all the way to Napoleon, nobody constructed roads. You will see how pivotal was to have a functioning port combined with the control of the caravan routes. So the mountain range, for those that have been to Croatia, is definitely impressive. Once you get to Croatia, you realize basically that in fact, why does the country have such a funny shape? It's not only because of the Turkish conquest. There was a reason why the Turks did not take over this part, which is now part of Croatia, and that was because it was quite unhospitable. It was difficult to maneuver through these high mountains, and that is the reason why Dubrovnik was also able to remain independent for a great deal of time. So you don't have big island in front. You can easily spot the approaching danger. And behind the city of Dubrovnik is quite difficult terrain that you would have to maneuver through to get to the city. There were caravan routes, and there still are. They're basically one of the tours that I'm doing with the people that are visiting Dubrovnik that are more interested in seeing the outskirts. And at the time, when Dubrovnik was at the height of its power, you would have to have a donkey or a mule to go through these rugged terrain. And it wasn't only the sheer inhospitable terrain that was the problem. There was also a problem with the brigands and the highwaymen. And that was also something that you had to keep in mind when you were performing the duties of the trip.
Does that mean that because of its location and the difficult high ground surrounding it, that people were encouraged to take a boat or a ship there?
Exactly. That was the easiest route. That was the safest route, if you wish.
And so that meant that there was kind of a tendency for people traveling to Dubrovnik to use a fisherman or a merchant to get to Dubrovnik. And so maybe that changed the type of travel that would come into Dubrovnik, and it became even more so a mercantile city. Would that be a true statement?
Yeah, it would be definitely a true statement. In fact, the route to Constantinople, or better known as Istanbul currently, was starting from Dubrovnik. So Dubrovnik was at the terminus of this route coming from the Istanbul, where all the goods from the east would be piled on ships that sailed across the Mediterranean towards the Western countries. Now, that was the easy part, getting to Dubrovnik. From Dubrovnik, through inhospitable terrain of the Balkan Peninsula, all the way down, let's say, to the capital of the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul. There were numerous other issues that the traveler from 1300 and 1400 would be facing, but the Dubrovnikers, while living there and supplying the entire region with salt, acquired the experience to deal with the people of the area. In fact, they were the main supplier for all these different countries in the Dubrovnik hinterland, and all the way down to Bulgaria, all the way up to the Black Sea and Greece and Romania, supplying with the Western merchandise during the times of the Ottoman Empire. So it was all these trading connections that Dubrovnik nurtured, even before the Ottomans conquered the entire region, was actually what enabled the city to survive. It was also helpful, as I said, that the languages in the region were similar to the ones spoken in Dubrovnik, and it sort of allowed Dubrovnik to breathe with both lungs. So you had the overland trade on one side and the maritime trade on the other. So if the conditions proved to be difficult on one side, you could sort of change the attention towards the other side and make the city still, I would say, relatively profitable.
Very good. So looking at the map here, we can see that Bosnia and Herzegovina have a sliver of coastline. Now, my wife is Croatian. She's from Hvar, the island there. And I pointed out to her how Croatians are so mean that they take so much of the coastline, and poor Bosnia and Herzegovina have only a tiny bit of it. And to which she replies with disdain and a bit of outrage, because that coastline, as treasured as it is by Bosnia and Herzegovina, I imagine the beach there is crowded all the time. That little sliver of land, I mean, how many kilometers is that? Maybe 10 kilometers? I don't know, judging by this map. But that breaks up Croatia. So if you're driving from Split to Dubrovnik, you have to leave the country and rejoin the country. And I imagine that inconvenience makes it more difficult, not exactly physically, but just in people's minds. It's another way Dubrovnik is separated, because there's another obstacle to get through in the form of handing over your passport to get to Dubrovnik, and it is, literally separated from the rest of Croatia.
Well, I usually like to say it makes the wait worthwhile. So once you go across the customs and once you finally handed back the passport, you're probably getting to the best part of the country.
Yeah.
Probably
that separation is, I suppose, it's in line with Dubrovnik's independent history, where it's kept separate from the Ottomans, it's kept separate from the Austro-Hungarians, it's done its best to get away from the Venetians, and now it's keeping away from the rest of Croatia. So physically that's have an impact. My wife noticed also how the accent in Dubrovnik reminded her more so, well, it reminded her somewhat of Italian. Obviously it's still Croatian, but the pronunciation of words was quite different to her ears, and to my naive ears as well. I could hear that there were slight differences. So there is still a lot of independence. It still has a lot of, or rather the people of Dubrovnik still have a lot of pride in their city. Would you say that because of all those factors, because of all that history, because of that independence, that legacy of independence, that people in Dubrovnik are more of, let's say they're more of Dubrovnik than of Croatia?
I would definitely agree. In fact, Dubrovnik's independence was actually much longer than the existence of Croatian Kingdom. So Croatian Kingdom is roughly 200 years against Dubrovnik's 150 years of its independence. So I would say regional identity is fairly strong over here. We are not attached to the rest of the country for historic reasons. In fact, that tiny sliver of land that belongs to Bosnia now was the buffer zone that Dubrovnik ceded voluntarily to the Ottoman Empire. So basically, Bosnia wouldn't have this part if it wasn't for us to give it to them. So this was given to the Ottomans as a buffer zone, so it would protect them from possible Venetian attacks. This happened in 1600s, after the biggest, I would say, catastrophe that hit the city in its history, the earthquake in 1667, which killed 1/4 of the population of Dubrovnik at the time. So Dubrovnik was busy repairing the battlements, restoring life, restoring trade, restoring pretty much the livelihood of the people. So they could not keep an eye on Venetians, what they're trying to do, because Venice was always looming behind the horizon. Thanks to this special relationship that they had with the Ottoman Empire, they managed to strike a deal, and they gave them 2 tiny portions of land. So the buffer zone, which is now known, that belongs to Bosnia and Herzegovina, is one of them. The other one is called Sutorina, which is a bit more difficult to be seen here on this map, but I'll try to show it to you on the other one. Sorry. So basically, the other portion of land that was ceded to the Ottoman Empire belongs now to Montenegro. And Montenegro is, as you can see, this country further down southeast. Now it became part of Montenegro, but at the time Montenegro was largely taken over by the Ottoman Empire too. So Dubrovnik was protected from both sides by a far more powerful country and far more powerful army than they had, since the Venetians could sneak up basically from the left or right, which actually gave them some time to restore Dubrovnik to its original state and continue with the trading activities in this area.
There's a great point that you mentioned during our tour, and correct me if I get this wrong, but you said that at one point the Ottomans, of course, were encroaching upon the region of Dubrovnik, and you know, the Venetians were annoying Dubrovnik as well, whereas Austria-Hungary was at a time a bit too far away, but of course it was powerful. So the Council of Dubrovnik approached Austria-Hungary and said, hey, we wanted to ally with you. And therefore, if the Venetians came to Dubrovnik, the council could say, hey, don't mess with us, or the Austro-Hungarians will come after you. And they could say that likewise to the Ottomans. And this worked for Dubrovnik, particularly because Dubrovnik was too far away from Austria-Hungary to pay taxes or pledge fealty or basically hold their end of the bargain. So Dubrovnik could say still legally that they were protected by Austria-Hungary and kind of just, you know, leveraging the weight and gravitas of the Austro-Hungarian Empire against its other enemies. So, you know, did I get that right?
Well, I would say Hungary, because Austria-Hungary only came to existence maybe...
Right, yeah, in the 1700s or so.
Time to Hungary, the Kingdom of Hungary, which, by the way, was joined to the Kingdom of Croatia through personal union, sort of like something you had between Scotland and England. So through the person of the monarch, it became one country. So while this was being arranged, the Venetians pretty much took over the control of the south of Croatia, meaning the island of Hvar, Brač, split, including Dubrovnik, in 1200s. And it was at that time that the Dubrovnikers approached the Hungarian king and pledged their allegiance to the king, who was basically coveting the coast, since he was the natural, he would be the legal heir to the throne of Croatia, but he still had to conquer it. And Venice was his main obstacle, so it was marriage of convenience, if you wish. Dubrovnik and Hungarians had the same enemy. It was the Republic of Venice. Venice was trying to stifle Dubrovnik's trade, and it was coveting the coastline of Croatia, which basically officially belonged to the King of Hungary. So the Dubrovnikers managed to map out the deal and get a better position for themselves and their, of course, commercial interests, meaning that once the Venetians are out of the picture after they're defeated, the whole coastline will come to the fall of the Hungarian kingdom, or it was at the time known as Hungarian Croatian kingdom, but Dubrovnik would be treated differently. In a way, it would elect its own government, pass its own laws, and the king would only be tied to the city when there was a problem. So basically, if Dubrovnik was under siege by, let's say, Venetians or the Ottomans, the king would come to the aid. He would try to save the city. Dubrovnik obviously paid the tribute for all this service. And after Hungarians defeated Venetians, Dubrovnik was able to gain, let's say, full-scale independence. So the difference between Venice on one side, which was a commercial power, and direct rival of Dubrovnik and the Kingdom of Hungary was that Hungary was a landed force. Basically, Hungary was a feudal kingdom, so it was completely different than the political system that existed in Dubrovnik. So Dubrovnik never had a king or a prince. Dubrovnik actually had a council that would elect a governor for a limited period of time, and he would alternate in power. And in fact, the Hungarians would just have to approve the choice of Dubrovnik's council. So that was it was only a formality. So Dubrovnik was actually able to get all the benefits of being an offshoot of a bigger kingdom to develop its own political system and its own virtually holding to independence. So this loose autonomy sort of morphed into independence. But the way it was done, it was also interesting. So while Dubrovnik was paying the Hungarian kingdom the tribute to remain protected by the king's army, in the same time they also approached the other potential pretendant to the control of the region, and that was the Republic. That was the Ottoman Empire. So the Turks, on one side, were also paid by the Dubrovnik Republic in the same time when they were paying the tribute to the Hungarians. So if you wish, they were hedging the bet. So these two strong forces were about to collide. In 1526, Hungarians were defeated by the Ottomans, and Dubrovnik just suspended the payment to Hungarians because there was no reason to continue paying them the tribute since they were already out of the picture. At a certain point in time, Dubrovnik was paying 7 different countries a tribute in the same time.
Wow.
And the bottom line to this is, so Dubrovnik was virtually independent. So everybody would say, okay, Dubrovnik was Hungarian dependency, Dubrovnik was Ottoman dependency. But if you have so many players involved, and they all claim to have you or control you, is it you that you're controlling them, since you're paying them and they're not paying you? So that's where I would say the importance of the Dubrovnik system actually comes from.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it reminds me of the history of Ireland, where Ireland was not so geographically central. So if I just show you a map here of Western Europe, I don't know if you can see that well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can see how Ireland here off the west coast of Britain is rather isolated. You know, if we were somewhere like the Netherlands, we were somewhere like Amsterdam, there would be a lot more options around us for allies as well as of course enemies. But Ireland's geography has played a big part in its history, in that we had only one enemy, and we had that enemy for a long, long time. So in the 1100s, Ireland was invaded from Britain by the Normans, aka the English, aka the British, and they only left, let's say, in 1922. So you had over 700 years of English/British occupation of the island of Ireland. And throughout those centuries, the Irish, of course, are not people to stand down. We are the Rocky Balboa of people. We keep on getting punched in the face. We keep on getting knocked down. But the more we get knocked down, the better able we become at picking ourselves up. So we kept on fighting the British, but we needed allies, and we definitely needed stronger allies. And of course, at this time, Ireland was completely controlled, so you couldn't do anything in Ireland. You couldn't train an army in Ireland because it was sedition, it was insurrection, and we didn't have the resources anymore. So we looked to France, we looked to Spain. They were basically our allies in the early modern period. We had a bit of allies coming from Scotland in the late medieval period in the 1300s, but really our options were slim. And when the English became the masters of the seas, particularly in the 1700s, getting from Dublin down to Spain or through to France became very difficult. The English would stop you, and they'd attack the boat, and they'd good luck. So, you know, that's interesting to me, because we had very few allies, we had very few enemies. Oh, we had one enemy, and we had lip service paid to us at various times by France or Spain. So anyway, and then during the First World War, Germany as well, a little bit. This was before Irish independence. So anyway, I'll just close this off. You can go back to your screen. Let me see, I'll just stop this here. And we'll just look one more time at Dubrovnik and talk about the impact of earthquakes on Dubrovnik. I mean, earthquakes are something that don't occur in Ireland. Earthquakes have had a big impact on cities in particular around the world. Croatia still suffers from earthquakes. When was that earthquake and that kind of aftershock in Zagreb? That was only a few months ago. What was that, in February?
That was in March.
March 2020, yeah. Still having an impact there. And as you said, in Dubrovnik in 1667, the earthquake that occurred not only killed a quarter of the inhabitants, but it marks the end of the height of Dubrovnik, right?
In fact, yes, that would be the first nail in the coffin of once powerful and glorious Dubrovnik Republic. The other one will be the shifting of the trading routes. So the problem was that the New World was discovered, and all of a sudden all these ships relying on the goods coming from Asia switched to the coast of the Atlantic. Then it was also the demise or slow demise of the Ottoman Empire. So they were no longer as powerful as they used to be. So the problem was that once the central state starts deteriorating, the regional powers see the benefits. So there were continuous wars in the outskirts of Dubrovnik, and it was no longer as safe for trade. And of course, it was the final, I would say, blow was Napoleonic conquest. So you learn of Napoleon.
It's just about got there, just about. Okay, Tomislav, thanks very much for that. That was very interesting. There were a lot of points there, and it's pretty interesting. I don't know about you, but I love geography, and I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people around the world don't have the same fascination for geography. I'm a sucker for a good map, a good old map, even a modern map. You know, I look at maps to see the shape of the country. I'm like, why is it that shape? And Croatia has been referred to as a wing shape or a bird shape, right? It's one of the oddest shaped countries in the world. Look at it there. It's a bit of a mess, you know. So we learned today how geography has determined the shape of Croatia, not just politically, but also in terms of its history, in terms of how it stayed out of the Ottoman Empire. And of course, we looked at Dubrovnik and how all of those factors were really magnified in Dubrovnik's case. So to finish up, Tomislav, if you just want to tell people about where they can find you online, your websites, the tour companies that you run, the types of tours that you offer, and anything else that you think is relevant.
Well, I think Carmen has already put it. There's the website dubrovnikexpert.com, which is basically giving you the diverse options what you can do if you decide to visit Dubrovnik either via cruise ship or flying into Dubrovnik. I'll be happy to show you around. There are various options from walking tours to driving tours, even seeing the neighboring states, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro. Montenegro is about 40 minutes drive from here. Bosnia is about 15 minutes drive to the border. So technically speaking, you can visit 3 countries while staying in Dubrovnik. You can see 3 countries in one day. So having breakfast in Croatia, lunch in Montenegro, and dinner in Bosnia, and make it back to Dubrovnik for a nightcap after that. Then I also do more, I would say, specialty type tours for those that may know Dubrovnik as fabled King's Landing from the Game of Thrones. Dubrovnik has been featured in 7 out of 8 seasons of the popular HBO TV show, playing the part of the capital of Westeros. My other website where you can book that type of tours is tourthegameofthrones.com. And I'm happy to say that this tour was a major hit in the last couple of years, which propelled me to number 4 on TripAdvisor list. Actually, I'm currently number 4. I was number 1 for a while. So because of obvious reasons, the touring is a bit suspended lately. I'm working on getting back to number 1, but we'll see. So yeah, about 98% of the reviews are 5 bubbles on TripAdvisor. So yeah, you can use these two websites to get in touch with me, either dubrovnikexpert.com or tourthegameofthrones.com. And
excellent.
Dubrovnik soon.
Perfect, brilliant. So guys, if you're listening, the point of this video was just to talk about a particular factor of Dubrovnik's history and culture in depth. I find it very interesting, and that's the type of detail that I like to go on when I'm experiencing a tour. So when I'm the tourist or the visitor on the tour, when I give tours, much like when Tomislav gives tours, they're all custom made. So they're tailor made to the client, to the traveler. So when we give tours ourselves, we wouldn't go into this much detail unless you're asking these questions. You know, what makes a great tour is knowing your clients, knowing what to say, but more importantly, knowing what not to say, because people have a limited amount of attention, and you want to save only the best, only the highlights, only the most important things for their ears. So of course, Tomislav can go into detail, but what he'll do and what I'll do is we keep it varied, and we have a nice mix of depth and light-hearted stuff, just to kind of keep your energy levels up. Obviously, you can see Tomislav, as he said, through those websites. I'll put the actual URLs in the description of this video. I do private walking tours of Dublin. We are also on 98% on TripAdvisor. 98% of the reviews are 5 stars, though you have quite a few more than us. We do sightseeing tours of the city, be it 3 hours, 5 hours, or 8 hours. They're all customizable. They're very leisurely paced. So the 5-hour tour is the most popular one. It's called Nearly All of Dublin in 5 hours. And it involves seeing most of the sites, having a coffee break, having a lunch break, and visiting the amazing old library of Trinity College. So it's a nice varied day, and it's a nice stretch of time. It's enough to kind of get into the depth, get into the soul of Dublin and Ireland. We have a pub crawl as well. We have a museums tour, which I'm very excited about because it's just new. And then we have a few combination tours. So one of them is called Sights and Pints, where we see some sights and then go to the pub. And then once we're finished our drink, then we go outside, see some more sights until we get thirsty. So that's a very popular one, needless to say. And we also facilitate guided tours outside of Dublin. So particularly if you're coming on a cruise ship, we offer shore excursions leaving from Dublin, going to Newgrange and the Boyne Valley, the Irish version of the Valley of the Kings, to the north of Dublin. And a short drive to the south of Dublin is County Wicklow, which is known as the Garden of Ireland. It's just a beautiful landscape there. There's also the ancient monastic ruin of Glen de Loch, where St. Kevin founded a monastery. And then a very long day trip. Well, I mean, it's 12 hours a day trip from Dublin on the east coast to the cliffs of Moher on the west coast. And then the last one is a trip up to Belfast to see the Giant's Causeway and learn about the very interesting recent history of Northern Ireland. So all there is left to say is thank you, Tomislav. Hvala. for having a chat with us today and telling us all about the impact that geography had on Dubrovnik and Croatia. And is there anything else you want to say?
Well, basically, I would just like to say that all of our tours are customizable. So basically, the traveler is the one that dictates the pace and the topics, and we could shuffle through easily. And it often happens that we have a combination, let's say, of the Game of Thrones and standard history, but more often happens that we end up in a bar and have a glass of wine. Our beer is not as good as Irish, but
yes, but the wine is amazing, and the olive oil, and the rakia.
Bit more of a specialty, and I'm also certified sommelier of the first level, so technically for Croatian wine. So if you want to learn Croatia through the wine, if you want to drink your way through Croatia, I'd say I would be a decent person to.
Yeah, and I will say to everybody that Croatian wine is better than you'd think. And by that I mean everyone just knows, you know, the New World wines and the Old World wines, and they think of Italy and Spain and France and various New World ones. But there's a lot to be said for Croatian wine. My father actually is huge into wine, which is very atypical of an Irish person. Of course, it is typical that he drinks a lot of alcohol, but it's atypical that the form is in wine. And he owned a wine shop even. And we went to Hvar and visited my wife's father, and he actually makes wine, and my father was very impressed with the wine. It wasn't just courtesy and being nice. It was very good wine, and I've tasted it quite a few times, and it is very good. So that's just to add credibility to what Tomislav is saying. Okay, guys, we're going to leave it there. Thanks again, Tomislav. Thanks again, guys, for watching, for listening if you got to the very end, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, thanks, Tomislav.
Thanks, Garvan. It was a pleasure.
All right, take care. Bye.